This touching story will shake your soul. Before diving into it, right where you are watching the video from, the rain had ceased hours before, yet the pavement continued to shimmer beneath the golden luminescence of street lamps. Marcus Delroy reclined in the rear seat of his vehicle, gazing outward at the metropolis that yielded to his command. Though this particular evening, it seemed peculiarly unresponsive to his existence. His chauffeur understood not to break the quiet. The stillness separating them was dense, recognizable, the variety that emerged following evenings that merged into dawn. Marcus wore his tie loosely draped around his collar. His garment was creased in ways that ordinarily would have troubled him under alternative circumstances. Yet this evening, or more accurately, this early morning, he experienced a sense of disconnection, as though watching himself from afar. Elsewhere in the city, within a residence he financed but never regarded as home, a woman remained likely asleep beneath linens carrying the scent of costly fragrance and remorse. She occupied none of his thoughts presently. He contemplated nothing substantial, which seemed peculiar for someone who governed every aspect of his domain with merciless exactitude. The vehicle turned onto the tree-bordered avenue where his genuine residence existed, an expansive property concealed beyond wrought iron barriers and inherited wealth. Marcus shut his eyes briefly, releasing a slow breath. He would bathe, dress, and arrive at his workplace by 9. All would persist as it perpetually had. Such was his intention. Such had consistently been his intention. Yet intentions, even those devised by individuals who consider themselves invulnerable, can disintegrate when confronted with something considerably more subdued than aggression. They can vanish within the quietness of a resolution already reached, within the deliberate actions of someone who ceased questioning months prior. Marcus remained unaware, yet the existence he presumed he dominated had already concluded. The union he believed would persist because it invariably had, because she had invariably remained, because departing from him appeared unthinkable, had been terminated. Not through argument, but through methodical preparation. While he occupied the night, shrouded in the fantasy of liberation, his spouse had been finalizing her own ultimate arrangements. The barriers parted effortlessly as the automobile neared. The residence stood darkened, save for a solitary illumination in the culinary space, which appeared customary. Marcus presumed she slept. She typically did. Upon arriving at this hour, he acknowledged his chauffeur with a brief gesture and emerged into the crisp, pre-dawn atmosphere. His footwear made gentle sounds against the stones as he advanced toward the entrance. He released the lock, entered, and encountered a quietness that seemed altered. This was not the tranquil hush of a resting household. This was the vacant void of something previously present, but absent now. He halted in the entry area, his expression tightening somewhat, though he could not instantly recognize what seemed amiss. The atmosphere was motionless. The delicate fragrance of her scent, which customarily permeated the corridors, had vanished. He proceeded through the entrance hall into the parlor. Everything appeared unchanged initially. The furnishings occupied their positions, the artworks adorned the surfaces, the vessels rested on the shelf. Yet as his vision acclimated, he started recognizing the absences. The modest bronze figure she cherished had disappeared from the auxiliary table. The collection of volumes she maintained beside her preferred seating was absent. The woven covering she consistently arranged across the divan, the one her mother had crafted, was nowhere visible. Marcus felt his heartbeat accelerate. He advanced more rapidly through the eating area into the culinary space. The illumination he had observed from outside was a fixture on the workspace, intentionally activated. Adjacent to it rested an enclosure. His identity was inscribed on the exterior in her penmanship, precise and orderly. He observed it extensively before retrieving it. Within were the dissolution documents already executed. No correspondence, no clarification, merely the juridical termination of matrimony, methodical and absolute. His extremities shook faintly as he positioned the documents aside. He ascended the stairway, advancing 2 risers simultaneously, though he already comprehended what awaited discovery. Their sleeping chamber remained undisturbed on his portion, his garments still suspended in the wardrobe, his timepiece on the bedside surface, yet her portion stood vacant. The wardrobe entrances remained ajar, exposing unoccupied supports. Her storage compartments had been emptied. The laboratory surface, previously crowded with her preparations and cosmetics, was sanitized completely. She had departed thoroughly, as though she had never existed there whatsoever. Marcus positioned himself on the bed's periphery, the documents remaining in his grasp, and attempted to reconstruct when this had transpired. When had she determined? When had she ceased resisting, ceased investing emotion, ceased anticipating his arrival? He reflected upon the preceding months, pursuing the instance he should have observed, the cautionary indication he had overlooked. Yet, truthfully, he had not been observing. He had been excessively absorbed with his individual universe, his individual requirements, his individual conviction that she would perpetually remain because she perpetually had. He recalled the evenings he had occupied elsewhere, the justifications he had provided, the communications he had disregarded. He recalled how she had ceased inquiring about his whereabouts, ceased referencing the delayed arrivals, ceased extending toward him when he ultimately retired. He had confused her quietness for acquiescence, her composure for satisfaction. Yet quietness, he was starting to comprehend, was not absolution. It was the resonance of someone relinquishing attachment. Months previously, the indications had existed. Though Marcus had not perceived them, his spouse, Sophia, had ceased posing inquiries, not because she maintained confidence in him, but because she no longer required responses. She had already discovered them. It commenced with minor contradictions. A transaction record from an establishment they had never patronized jointly. A subtle aroma on his garment that was not her fragrance. Nocturnal communications he presumed he had been circumspect regarding. Initially, she persuaded herself she was fabricating concerns. Matrimony to an individual like Marcus necessitated a particular readiness to disregard certain matters, to acknowledge that his universe functioned by alternative principles. Yet instinct is an insistent phenomenon, particularly in a woman who had devoted years mastering the interpretation of unspoken signals. She commenced observing more attentively, not in an evident manner. She did not examine his possessions or insist upon clarifications. She merely observed. She recognized the configurations. The evenings he professed to be managing affairs, but arrived smelling of wine rather than whiskey. How he examined his communication device obsessively, displaying amusement at messages he never disclosed. The remoteness in his expression, even when he was corporally present. One afternoon, while conducting activities in a district of the metropolis she infrequently visited, Catherine observed them. Marcus and a woman she failed to recognize departing from a structure jointly. The woman expressed amusement at something he communicated, contacting his appendage in a manner that conveyed acquaintance, closeness. Marcus surveyed his surroundings cautiously before inclining downward to contact her temple with his lips. A movement so affectionate, it seemed like a transgression considerably more profound than the corporeal. Catherine did not challenge them. She did not weep or vocalize or insist upon clarification immediately on the thoroughfare. She merely observed from the opposite roadway, her spirit fracturing quietly, systematically, and subsequently, she rotated and departed. That constituted the instant the matrimony terminated, though Marcus would never comprehend it. Not for months, not until excessively delayed. From that occasion forward, Sophia commenced preparing. She consulted a legal representative, someone beyond Marcus's connections, someone who comprehended the necessity for caution. She acquired knowledge regarding her entitlements, regarding what she was authorized to, regarding how to safeguard herself juridically and monetarily from an individual whose authority extended into locations most individuals could not access. She established her individual financial repository, discreetly relocating resources she possessed access to into a location he could not access. She contacted former companions she had lost communication with throughout the years, reconstructing associations she would require when she ultimately departed. She compiled inventories, examined possessions, determined what possessed significance and what did not. Every determination was executed calmly, without anger, without theatrical display. She did not desire retribution. She desired liberation. And liberation, she understood, necessitated preparation. Simultaneously, Marcus's evenings with his companion Isabella intensified in occurrence. She was more youthful, energetic, abundant with amusement and radiance in a manner that seemed intoxicating following years of the subdued, constant presence of his spouse. Isabella did not pose challenging inquiries or anticipate emotional profundity. She was uncomplicated, straightforward, a respite from the burden of his obligations. She resided in a residence he had obtained for her, adorned ornaments he had purchased, and maintained conviction in the manner that companions frequently do, that eventually she would be selected, that eventually he would abandon his spouse and they would possess something genuine. Marcus never committed to this explicitly, yet he did not discourage the illusion either. It benefited him to permit her conviction. It rendered the evenings they occupied jointly seem less like transgression and more like a preview of some prospective actuality. Yet Isabella did not comprehend the expense of association with an individual like Marcus. She did not perceive the exploitation in his affection and the egocentrism in his devotion. She did not recognize that, to him, she was not an individual, but a utility, a location to retreat when the burden of his genuine existence became excessively substantial. She presumed she was exceptional. She presumed she was distinct. She presumed she was cherished. And because she presumed these aspects, she remained, evening following evening, maintaining conviction that forbearance would ultimately be compensated. Marcus, for his component, persuaded himself that he was administering both universes competently. He maintained conviction he could preserve his matrimony intact while satisfying himself with the comfort Isabella provided. He presumed his spouse remained unaware, or, if she did, that she had selected to acknowledge it as component of the existence she had committed to. He presumed he maintained dominion, yet dominion is a fabrication, particularly when constructed upon the quietness of someone who has ceased resisting. Catherine did not challenge Marcus, because challenge would have provided him the occasion to fabricate, to exploit, to persuade her to remain. She did not desire persuasion. She desired departure. And therefore she progressed through the ultimate months of their matrimony like a phantom, present yet not genuinely there, cordial yet not affectionate, executing the ceremonies of matrimony without any emotional contribution. She participated in gatherings, displayed pleasantness toward his affiliates, maintained the residence functioning efficiently. To anyone observing externally, nothing had transformed, yet internally she had already departed. The evening Marcus occupied with Isabella, the evening that would constitute the imperceptible transition, was unremarkable in most respects. They consumed sustenance at an establishment concealed within a district where nobody would identify him. They consumed wine, expressed amusement at narratives that seemed significant presently, yet would be disregarded by morning. Isabella inclined across the surface, her expression radiant with devotion, and communicated that she cherished him. Marcus displayed amusement, compressed her extremity, and communicated something ambiguous and reassuring that was not precisely a reciprocation, yet seemed adequately proximate. Subsequently, in the residence, they engaged intimately with the variety of fervor that seemed meaningful, yet was genuinely merely acquaintance disguised as ardor. Afterward, she descended into slumber against his torso, and Marcus remained conscious, observing the overhead surface, experiencing a peculiar vacancy he could not identify. He contemplated returning to his residence. He contemplated his spouse, isolated in their sleeping chamber, presumably asleep presently. He contemplated the existence he had constructed, the domain he had established, the authority he commanded, and he contemplated how none of it seemed adequate. Yet rather than examining that sensation, he displaced it aside, as he invariably did, and ultimately transitioned into a turbulent slumber. While Marcus slumbered beside his companion, Catherine was finalizing the remaining preparations. She had already relocated most of her possessions to a storage facility previously that week, transporting only modest quantities simultaneously so he would not observe. This evening, she assembled the ultimate essentials, the articles she could not abandon. Images of her progenitors, several ornamental pieces possessing emotional significance, volumes she had perused and reperused throughout the years. She progressed through the residence quietly, methodically, communicating silent farewells to chambers that had previously seemed like residence, yet presently seemed like confinement. And she was ultimately escaping. She positioned the dissolution documents on the culinary workspace, executed and finalized, accompanied by a collection of access implements. She did not compose correspondence. Nothing remained to communicate. Everything significant had been communicated in the quietness of the preceding months, in the void of challenge, in the deliberate separation she had preserved. She did not possess animosity toward him. She did not even attribute responsibility to him, not thoroughly. She merely comprehended that she merited more than he was capable of providing, and she was selecting herself. By the occasion the solar illumination commenced ascending, Catherine had departed. She transported herself from the residence with a perception of liberation so profound it nearly resembled sorrow. She did not observe rearward. She did not weep. She did not reconsider her determination. She merely transported herself toward an existence she would construct on her individual conditions, liberated from the burden of a matrimony that had expired extensively before it was juridically dissolved. Marcus occupied the morning following his arrival, attempting to comprehend what had transpired. He contacted her communication device repeatedly, yet it proceeded immediately to message recording. He contacted individuals who might possess knowledge of her location, yet nobody possessed responses, or if they did, they were not disclosing. He examined the residence again, pursuing indications for something he had overlooked, for any suggestion of where she had proceeded. Yet there was nothing. She had been meticulous. She had organized this deliberately, and she had provided no opportunity for discussion or restoration. The comprehension descended upon him gradually, substantially, like a burden compressing downward on his torso. She was not returning. This was not a disagreement they would resolve. This was not a theatrical departure intended to communicate a message. This was absolute. In the occasions that succeeded, Marcus attempted to persist as though nothing had transformed. He proceeded to his workplace, participated in assemblies, administered his operations with the identical, merciless competence he invariably had. Yet the residence seemed altered presently. It seemed vacant in a manner that possessed nothing to do with the absent possessions and everything to do with the void of the individual who had rendered it a residence. He discovered himself contemplating Catherine constantly, reconsidering instances from their matrimony, pursuing the location where circumstances had deteriorated. He recollected the initial years when she had observed him with something proximate to appreciation, when she had maintained conviction in him, despite comprehending what he was. He recollected the progressive deterioration of that conviction, how her expression had diminished throughout duration, how she had ceased extending toward him, ceased confiding in him, ceased being present even when she was corporally there. He had confused her persistence for allegiance, her quietness for acquiescence. He had presumed she would invariably remain because departing from him appeared unthinkable. Yet she had accomplished the unthinkable. She had departed, and she had accomplished it so quietly, so thoroughly, that he had not even perceived it approaching. Isabella recognized the transformation in him. He still arrived to observe her, yet he was remote, preoccupied, present corporally, yet absent in every alternative manner. She inquired what was incorrect, and he communicated nothing, yet she did not maintain conviction in him. She could perceive the alteration, how he observed her presently with something more proximate to remorse than devotion. She inquired if he was experiencing reconsideration, if he was returning to his spouse, and he communicated that his spouse had departed. Isabella experienced a surge of something that might have been optimism. Yet when she proposed they could ultimately be unified appropriately, Marcus did not respond as she anticipated. He did not attract her proximately and commit to a prospective existence. He merely observed her with exhausted expression and communicated nothing. That quietness communicated everything she required to comprehend. She was not the reward. She had never been the reward. She had been the liberation. And presently, that the circumstance he was liberating from had vanished, she no longer fulfilled a utility. Weeks transpired, subsequently months. The dissolution was finalized without opposition. Catherine had requested nothing beyond what was juridically hers. And Marcus, excessively depleted to resist, permitted the legal representatives to administer everything. He never observed her again. He acquired through reciprocal associates that she had relocated to another metropolis, that she was functioning adequately, that she appeared content. He desired to extend communication, to express remorse, to clarify, yet he comprehended it would not possess significance. The expression of remorse she had required years previously, and he had not provided it. The clarification she might have desired, she no longer maintained interest in comprehending. She had progressed forward, and he was positioned with the vacant comprehension that authority, currency, and dominion signified nothing when evaluated against the subdued respectability of someone who had selected to depart. Marcus ceased observing Isabella, not theatrically, not with clarification, yet progressively. The manner associations constructed on fabrication typically terminate. She contacted less frequently, and he responded less frequently, and ultimately the communications ceased altogether. He acquired subsequently that she had progressed forward, discovered someone alternative, someone who could provide her what he never could. He experienced no possessiveness, no perception of deprivation. If anything, he experienced relief. Relieved that she had discovered a method of departure, that she had not consumed additional years anticipating something that was never going to transpire. He occupied additional duration, isolated presently. The residence remained vacant, except for him and the personnel who arrived and departed. Without genuinely perceiving him, he progressed through the chambers like an outsider, troubled not by phantoms, yet by the recollection of a presence no longer there. He contemplated Catherine frequently, regarding the existence they might have possessed if he had been alternative, if he had observed attentively, if he had appreciated what he possessed, rather than invariably pursuing what he did not. Yet remorse, he was acquiring knowledge, is a futile sentiment. It transforms nothing. It restores nobody. It merely resides substantially in the torso, a persistent reminder of selections that cannot be reversed. One evening, Marcus discovered himself positioned in the sleeping chamber they had previously occupied jointly, retaining the dissolution documents she had positioned behind. He examined through them deliberately, as though anticipating discovering some concealed communication, some clarification for why she had departed without verbal expression. Yet there was nothing, merely the frigid juridical terminology of dissolution, the procedural termination of something that had expired extensively before it was dissolved. He positioned the documents aside and advanced to the aperture, observing outward at the metropolis that had previously seemed like his dominion, yet presently seemed unresponsive, expansive, and unconcerned. He comprehended subsequently what he should have understood considerably earlier. Quietness was not absolution. Separation was not acquiescence. And remaining was not identical to selecting. Catherine had remained for years, yet she had ceased selecting him extensively before she departed. He had confused her persistence for affection, her forbearance for dedication, her quietness for tranquility. Yet throughout she had been anticipating, not for him to transform, yet for the appropriate instant to depart. And when that instant arrived, she had seized it without reluctance, without theatrical display, without providing him the occasion to persuade her alternatively. Marcus contemplated the transgression, regarding Isabella, regarding the evenings he had occupied pursuing something he presumed he required. He comprehended presently that what he had been pursuing was not in another woman or another existence. It was something he had forfeited within himself, something he had relinquished fragment by fragment in the pursuit of authority and dominion. He had constructed a domain, instructed deference, commanded influence, yet in accomplishing so, he had disregarded how to be humane. And by the occasion he recollected, the individual who might have reminded him had already departed. The termination arrived not with challenge or restoration, yet with acknowledgement. Catherine never returned. She constructed a novel existence, one that did not incorporate him, and by all descriptions, she prospered. Marcus remained in the residence that no longer seemed like residence, encompassed by the domain he had constructed, authoritative and isolated. He acquired to exist with the void, with the remorse, with the subdued comprehension that some circumstances once fractured cannot be restored. Isabella diminished into recollection, a segment that seemed inconsequential presently in confrontation of what he had genuinely forfeited. And Marcus, the individual who had previously maintained conviction he dominated everything, arrived to comprehend the restrictions of authority. He could instruct allegiance through intimidation, deference through fortitude, compliance through coercion, yet he could not instruct affection. He could not dominate the spirit of someone who had selected to depart, and he could not reverse the deterioration of years occupied disregarding the solitary individual who genuinely possessed significance. The residence remained vacant. The matrimony remained terminated, and Marcus remained, acquiring excessively belatedly that the most hazardous quietness is not the variety that anticipates a disturbance, yet the variety that succeeds a departure. Because that quietness is absolute. That quietness is the resonance of someone who has already progressed forward, who has already selected an existence that does not incorporate you, who has already discovered tranquility in your void. And no quantity of authority, no quantity of remorse, no quantity of belated comprehension can restore them.